My name is Thomas Mitchell, and I've been ranching in the Montana wilderness for over 40 years. I've seen harsh winters that killed entire herds, droughts that turned green pastures into dust, and storms that could level a barn in minutes. But nothing in my life prepared me for what happened on September 15, 1995, when I found a Native American baby floating in a basket down the Yellowstone River, or for what would happen 28 years later when that baby returned as a fierce warrior to save my life. It was early morning, around 6 o'clock, and I was checking the fence line along the river that bordered my property. The autumn air was crisp, and the first frost of the season had painted the grass silver. My border collie, Rex, was running ahead of me, sniffing at rabbit tracks and chasing the occasional squirrel. That's when I heard a sound that didn't belong in the wilderness. It was faint at first, almost lost in the sound of the rushing water, but as I got closer to the riverbank, I realized it was crying. Baby crying. Rex, come here, boy, I called, and my dog immediately returned to my side. His ears perked up in alert. I followed the sound downstream, walking carefully along the rocky bank. The Yellowstone was running high that year due to heavy rains in the mountains, and the current was strong and dangerous. Whatever was making that sound was in serious trouble. That's when I saw it. A small woven basket, the kind I'd seen Native Americans use for gathering, floating in the calmer water near a fallen log about 20 feet from shore. Inside the basket, wrapped in what looked like traditional blankets, was a baby. Without thinking, I kicked off my boots and waded into the freezing water. The current was stronger than I'd expected, and I had to fight to keep my footing on the slippery rocks. Rex barked frantically from the shore, sensing the danger. Easy, boy, I called back to him. I've got this. The water was up to my chest by the time I reached the basket. Inside was a baby girl, maybe 3 or 4 months old, with the most beautiful dark eyes I'd ever seen. She had stopped crying and was looking up at me with an expression that seemed far too wise for someone so young. She was wrapped in blankets that were clearly handmade, with intricate beadwork and patterns that I recognized as Native American craftsmanship. There was also a small leather pouch tied to the basket, and inside it, I could see what looked like a piece of carved bone or antler. Getting back to shore with the baby was even more challenging than reaching her had been. I had to hold the basket high above my head while fighting the current, and more than once, I nearly lost my footing. But somehow, we made it to the bank safely. The baby was cold but alert, and she seemed remarkably calm for someone who had just been rescued from a river. I wrapped her in my jacket and hurried back to the ranch house, Rex trotting alongside us. My wife Sarah had died 3 years earlier from cancer, so it was just me and Rex living in the big farmhouse that had been in my family for 4 generations. I had no idea how to care for a baby, but I knew I had to try. I called Dr. Peterson, the local physician who had delivered half the babies in the county, and he came out to the ranch within an hour. After examining the baby, he confirmed that she was healthy, though slightly underweight. Thomas, he said, this baby is maybe 4 months old, and she's been well cared for. Someone loved this child. The question is, how did she end up in the river? I don't know, Doc, but I found this with her. I showed him the leather pouch and its contents. Dr. Peterson examined the carved piece carefully. This looks like a traditional Native American amulet, probably crow or blackfeet, based on the carving style. You need to contact the tribal authorities. What? If they can't find her family, then you'll need to contact social services. A baby can't just live on a ranch with a bachelor rancher, Thomas. There are procedures, laws. But even as he said it, I was looking down at the baby girl in my arms, and I knew I couldn't just hand her over to strangers. Something about finding her felt like destiny, like she was meant to be here. Over the next few days, I contacted the Crow Nation and the Blackfeet tribe, as well as local law enforcement. No one had reported a missing baby. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere. The social worker who came to evaluate the situation was a kind woman named Margaret Torres. She was impressed by how well I was caring for the baby. Despite my lack of experience, Mr. Mitchell, she said, you're doing an amazing job, but this is a temporary situation. We need to find this child a proper home. What if I wanted to adopt her? Margaret looked surprised. You're 62 years old, recently widowed, and you live alone on a remote ranch. The courts would have serious concerns. I may be old, but I'm healthy. I have a successful ranch, financial stability, and more love to give than I know what to do with. This baby was brought to me for a reason. What would you name her? I looked down at the baby, who was sleeping peacefully in my arms. River. Her name is River. The adoption process took almost 2 years. There were home visits, psychological evaluations, financial reviews, and countless meetings with lawyers and social workers. But eventually, the courts agreed that I could provide a stable, loving home for River. During those 2 years, I learned everything I could about caring for a child. I baby-proofed the ranch house, learned to change diapers and prepare formula, and even taught myself to braid hair by watching YouTube videos. But more importantly, I learned about River herself. She was an extraordinary child, intelligent, curious, and surprisingly fearless. By the time she was walking, she was exploring every corner of the ranch. She seemed to have an instinctive connection to animals. and even the most skittish horses would calm down when she was near. As she grew older, I told her the story of how I found her. I also tried to teach her about her Native American heritage, even though I didn't know which specific tribe she belonged to. We attended powwows, I bought her books about Native American history and culture, and I made sure she understood that she was part of something bigger than just our little ranch. When River turned 16, she started having dreams. Vivid dreams about warriors and battles, about protecting the land and the people she loved. She would wake up speaking words in a language neither of us recognized. "Dad," she said one morning over breakfast, "I think I need to find my people." "What do you mean?" "I mean my birth family, my tribe. I feel like there's something I'm supposed to do, something I'm supposed to learn." I had always known this day would come, but it still broke my heart a little. "If that's what you want, River, I'll help you however I can." We started by reaching out to tribal genealogists and historians. River's DNA test showed she was primarily Native American, with markers suggesting Crow and Blackfeet ancestry. But it wasn't until she turned 18 that we got a breakthrough. A tribal elder named Joseph Crowfeather contacted us after hearing about River's story. He said he had been searching for her for years. "Your daughter," he told me over the phone, "is the granddaughter of one of our most respected warriors. She was taken from us during a raid by a rival faction within the tribe. We thought she was dead." A raid. There are some among our people who believe the old ways are the only ways. They opposed her mother's marriage to a man from outside the tribe. When River was born, they saw her as a symbol of contamination. They tried to kill her and her parents. Dead murdered the same night River was taken. But her grandmother, before she died, prophesied that River would return as a great warrior when her people needed her most. River listened to this conversation with tears streaming down her face. When Joseph finished speaking, she said, "I want to come home. I want to learn who I'm supposed to be." That summer, River left the ranch to live with the Crow Nation and learn about her heritage. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, watching her drive away. But I knew it was what she needed. She spent 2 years with the tribe, learning their language, their customs, and their fighting techniques. She discovered that she came from a long line of warriors, protectors who had defended their people for generations. When she returned to the ranch at age 20, she was transformed. She was still the loving daughter I had raised, but she was also something more, a fierce, confident woman who carried herself like the warrior she had been trained to be. "Dad," she said on her first night back, "I learned something important while I was away." "What's that?" "I learned that family isn't just about blood. You saved my life, you raised me with love, and you gave me the strength to discover who I really am. You're my father in every way that matters. And you're my daughter, River. Always there's something else." Joseph told me that the prophecy about my return isn't finished. He said I would come back to protect the one who saved me, when he needed it most. "I don't need protecting, River. I can take care of myself." She smiled, but there was something serious in her eyes. "We'll see about that, Dad." I didn't understand what she meant then. But 8 years later, when a group of armed men came to my ranch with the intention of killing me, I would discover just how prophetic those words had been. 8 years passed peacefully after River returned from her time with the Crow Nation. She had decided to stay on the ranch, helping me manage the operation while also serving as a liaison between the local Native American communities and the surrounding ranchers. She had a gift for bringing people together, for finding common ground where others saw only conflict. River had also started a family of her own. She married a good man named David Crowfeather, Joseph's nephew, and they had 2 beautiful children, a 6-year-old son named Storm and a 4-year-old daughter named Dawn. The ranch house that had once echoed with loneliness was now filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of a growing family. But our peaceful life was about to be shattered by forces I never could have anticipated. It started with the discovery of rare earth minerals on my property. A geological survey commissioned by the state had revealed significant deposits of lithium and other valuable minerals beneath my grazing land. Within weeks, I was receiving offers from mining companies wanting to buy my ranch. The offers were substantial enough money to set up my family for generations. But this land had been in my family for over a century. My great-grandfather had homesteaded here. My grandfather had survived the Great Depression here, and my father had built the ranch into what it was today. I wasn't about to sell it to strip miners. "Mr. Mitchell," said the representative from Apex Mining Corporation, a slick man in an expensive suit named Bradley Thornton, "you're sitting on a gold mine. Literally, the minerals under your land are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm sitting on a ranch that's worth more to me than money," I replied. "The answer is no. Sir, with respect, you're 70 years old. How much longer can you realistically manage a ranch this size?" "As long as I'm breathing, Mr. Thornton, and when I'm gone, my daughter will take over." Thornton's expression hardened. "Mr. Mitchell, Apex Mining has invested significant resources in this project. We have contracts with the government, obligations to our shareholders. This project is going to happen, with or without your cooperation. Are you threatening me? I'm simply stating facts." Sometimes, when property owners are unreasonable, circumstances have a way of changing their minds. River, who had been listening from the kitchen, stepped into the living room. "I think you need to leave now. Mr. Thornton. Thornton looked at River with obvious disdain. And you are? I'm his daughter, and I'm telling you to get off our property. The Indian daughter, I assume? You should know that this land was stolen from your people in the first place. We're simply taking it back. River's expression didn't change, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. This land belongs to my father. He earned it through 40 years of hard work, and if you think you can intimidate us into selling, you're mistaken. We'll see about that, Thornton said as he left. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening around the ranch. Fences were cut, allowing cattle to wander onto the highway. Our water supply was contaminated with diesel fuel. Equipment was sabotaged, and several of our horses were found with cuts that looked deliberate. I contacted the sheriff, but there was never any evidence linking these incidents to Apex Mining. It was all circumstantial. Dad, River said one evening, as we surveyed the latest damage, a barn door that had been torn off its hinges. They're trying to make it impossible for us to operate the ranch. I know, but I'm not giving up. Neither am I, but I think we need to be prepared for this to escalate. What do you mean? I mean that Thornton didn't strike me as the type of man who accepts no for an answer, and a company that's willing to sabotage our operation probably won't stop there. River was right to be concerned. A few days later, I received a visit from a group of men who made Thornton look like a choir boy. I was working in the barn when I heard vehicles approaching. Through the window, I saw 3 black SUVs pulling up to the house. 6 men got out, all wearing dark clothing and carrying weapons that were clearly visible. I reached for the rifle I kept in the barn. But before I could grab it, one of the men appeared in the doorway. Mr. Mitchell, he said in a voice that was calm but menacing. We need to talk. About what? About your continued refusal to sell your property to Apex Mining. I already told Thornton the ranch isn't for sale. Mr. Thornton is no longer handling this matter. My name is Marcus Kane, and I represent a different kind of negotiation. Kane was a large man with cold eyes and scars on his hands that suggested he was no stranger to violence. The other men spread out around the barn, effectively surrounding me. What kind of negotiation? The kind where you sign the papers, take the money, and disappear. Tonight? And if I refuse, then you'll disappear anyway. But without the money, I realized I was in serious trouble. These weren't corporate representatives, they were hired killers. And I was alone in the barn with no way to call for help. Where's my daughter? Your daughter and her family are currently secured in the house. Their safety depends on your cooperation. My blood ran cold. If you hurt them, Mr. Mitchell, you're in no position to make threats. You have 2 choices. Sign the papers and live, or refuse and watch your family die before you join them. Kane pulled out a folder containing legal documents and set them on a workbench. You have 5 minutes to decide. I looked at the papers, then at the armed men surrounding me. I thought about River, about Storm and Dawn, about David. I couldn't let anything happen to them. But as I reached for the pen, I heard a sound that made my heart leap with hope, the distinctive whistle that River had used since she was a child, to signal me from across the ranch. Kane heard it too. What was that? Probably just a bird, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I knew it wasn't a bird. It was River, and she was telling me that she was free and ready to act. What happened next was like something out of an action movie. The lights in the barn suddenly went out, plunging us into darkness. I heard Kane curse and order his men to find the electrical panel. In the darkness, I heard sounds of struggle, muffled cries, and what sounded like bodies hitting the ground. Kane was shouting orders, but his men weren't responding. A few minutes later, the lights came back on. Kane and I were alone in the barn. His 5 men were gone. Where are my men? Kane demanded, his weapon now pointed directly at me. I don't know, I said honestly. That's when River appeared in the doorway. She was dressed in dark clothing and moved with the silent grace of a predator. In her hands was a traditional Native American war club, and her face was painted with war markings I had never seen before. Your men are alive, she said to Kane, but they won't be conscious for several hours. Kane spun around to face her, his weapon now trained on River. Who the hell are you? I'm the daughter of the man you just threatened. I'm also a warrior of the Crow Nation, trained in combat techniques that your men have never encountered. You're just one woman. I have a gun. River smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You had 6 men with guns? How did that work out for you? Kane's hand was shaking slightly as he tried to keep his weapon pointed at both River and me. This isn't over. Apex Mining will get this land one way or another. No, River said, stepping closer. It is over. You're going to leave this ranch. You're going to tell Apex Mining that this property is off limits, and you're never going to threaten my family again. Or what? Or I'll show you why my ancestors were feared by the U.S. Army. Kane looked at River, then at me, then back at River. Something in her eyes must have convinced him that she wasn't bluffing, because he slowly lowered his weapon. This isn't finished, he said as he backed toward the door. Yes, it is, River replied, and if you or anyone from Apex Mining comes back here, you won't leave alive. After Kane left, I found his men tied up with rope behind the barn. They were unconscious, but breathing. River had somehow managed to take down 5 armed men without seriously injuring any of them. How did you do that? I asked. 2 years of warrior training, she said. Plus the element of surprise. They weren't expecting to face someone who knows how to fight. What about David and the kids? Safe. I got them out of the house before I came for you. We called the sheriff and reported the incident. Kane and his men were arrested for armed assault and attempted extortion. It turned out that Apex Mining had hired them without going through proper legal channels, which resulted in a federal investigation that ultimately shut down the company. That night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, River said, "Dad, do you remember what I told you when I came back from the reservation? About the prophecy? You said you would protect the one who saved you when he needed it most." "That's right. Today, I fulfilled that prophecy. You saved my life, River. You saved all our lives, just like you saved mine 28 years ago." I looked at my daughter, this fierce, beautiful warrior who had been brought to me by the river as a helpless baby, and who had returned that gift by becoming my protector when I needed her most. "I guess we're even now," I said. River smiled and took my hand. "No, Dad, we're family. We'll never be even. We'll just keep saving each other for as long as we live." 6 months after the incident with Apex Mining, life on the ranch had returned to a peaceful routine. The federal investigation had not only shut down the mining company, but had also resulted in new protections for family ranches against corporate intimidation. River had become something of a local hero, and her story had inspired other Native American communities to stand up for their rights. But our story was far from over. In fact, the most extraordinary chapter was yet to be written. It began with the arrival of Joseph Crowfeather, the tribal elder who had first contacted us about River's heritage. He came to the ranch on a cold February morning, accompanied by 3 other elders I had never met. "Thomas," Joseph said as I welcomed them into the house, "we need to speak with you and River about something very important." River was in the kitchen preparing coffee when the elders arrived. When she saw them, her expression became serious. "Grandfather Joseph, what brings you here?" "River, we've come to tell you the rest of your story, the part we couldn't share before because you weren't ready to hear it." We all sat around the kitchen table, and Joseph began to speak in a voice heavy with the weight of history. "River, when you were born, there were signs. Signs that the tribal shamans recognized as significant. Your birth coincided with a rare celestial alignment, and you were born with a birthmark that matches ancient prophecies." "What kind of prophecies?" I asked. "Prophecies about a warrior who would bridge 2 worlds, the native world and the white world, a protector who would defend both peoples when they faced a common threat." River touched the small crescent-shaped birthmark on her shoulder that I had noticed when she was a baby. "This birthmark, yes, it's the mark of the Moon Warrior, a legendary figure from our oldest stories. We believe you are her reincarnation." "That's impossible," River said. "I'm just a rancher's daughter who learned some fighting techniques." "Art?" you asked one of the other elders, an elderly woman named Mary White Eagle. "Tell me, River, have you ever had dreams about battles you never fought? Have you ever known things you were never taught?" River was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," she finally admitted. "Since I was a child, I've had dreams about warriors and battles. And sometimes, when I'm fighting or protecting someone, I know techniques that no one ever taught me." "That's because you carry the memories of the Moon Warrior," Joseph explained. "She was a legendary protector who lived over 200 years ago. She was known for her ability to unite different tribes against common enemies." "Why are you telling us this now?" I asked. Mary White Eagle answered, "Because the prophecy isn't complete. The Moon Warrior was destined to face her greatest challenge in her second life, a challenge that would determine the fate of both native and non-native peoples." "What kind of challenge?" "We don't know exactly, but the signs are beginning to appear. Strange weather patterns, animal behavior that defies explanation, and reports of unusual phenomena from tribes across the country." Over the next few weeks, I began to notice what the elders were talking about. The weather had become increasingly erratic, sudden temperature changes, storms that appeared out of nowhere, and winds that seemed to blow from all directions at once. The animals on the ranch were acting strangely too. The horses were restless and nervous. The cattle were clustering together in unusual formations, and even Rex, now an old dog, was constantly alert and anxious. But it was the dreams that convinced me something extraordinary was happening. Riva had always been a sound sleeper, but now she was waking up several times each night, speaking in languages that sounded ancient and describing visions of a great darkness approaching. "Dad," she said one morning over breakfast, "I think I know what the prophecy is about." "What do you mean?" "In my dreams I see a great shadow covering the land. It's not a natural phenomenon, it's something that feeds on conflict and hatred, and it's getting stronger." "That sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, River." "I know how it sounds, but I also know what I'm seeing, and I think it's connected to what's been happening around the country." She was right. Over the past few months, there had been an increase in violence and conflict across the nation. Racial tensions were escalating, political divisions were becoming more extreme, and there seemed to be an atmosphere of anger and hatred that was growing stronger every day. "River," I said, "even if what you're saying is true, what can one person do about something like that?" "Not one person," Dad, but maybe one person can bring others together. That's when River proposed something that seemed impossible, a gathering of all the tribes in the region, along with local ranchers, farmers, and townspeople. A meeting to discuss not just the strange phenomena we'd been experiencing, but also ways to work together to address the growing divisions in our communities. River, you're talking about bringing together groups that have been in conflict for over a century? I know, but that's exactly why it needs to happen. The darkness I see in my dreams feeds on division and hatred. The only way to fight it is with unity. Against all odds, River's plan worked. Word spread through both native and non-native communities about the gathering, and people began to respond. Some came out of curiosity, others out of desperation, but they came. On the day of the gathering, over 300 people assembled on our ranch. There were tribal elders and young activists, ranchers and farmers, business owners and teachers. It was the most diverse group I had ever seen in our part of Montana. River stood before the crowd, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her 28 years. My friends, she began, we are facing a crisis that threatens all of us, regardless of our race, our religion, or our politics. There is a darkness spreading across our land, feeding on our divisions and growing stronger with every act of hatred and violence. She paused, looking out over the crowd. But we have a choice. We can continue to let our differences divide us, or we can come together as one people, united in our love for this land and our commitment to protecting it. What happened next was extraordinary. People began to share their stories, talked about the challenges they faced. Native Americans spoke about their struggles to preserve their culture, and everyone discussed the strange phenomena they had been experiencing. As the day progressed, something remarkable occurred. The divisions that had seemed so insurmountable began to dissolve. People realized they had more in common than they had differences. They all loved the land, they all wanted to protect their families, and they all were concerned about the growing darkness that seemed to be engulfing the country. By the end of the day, they had formed what they called the Circle of Protection, a coalition of native and non-native peoples committed to working together to address the challenges facing their communities. But the real test came that night. As the gathering was winding down and people were preparing to leave, the sky suddenly darkened, not with clouds, but with something else, a shadow that seemed to have substance and malevolent intent. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a matter of minutes, and a wind began to blow that carried with it whispers of hatred and violence. People began to look at each other with suspicion and anger, as if the unity they had built during the day was being stripped away. River, I said, what's happening? It's the darkness, she replied, her voice calm despite the chaos around us. It's trying to destroy what we've built here. River walked to the center of the crowd and raised her voice above the wind. Everyone, listen to me. What you're feeling right now isn't real. It's the darkness trying to turn us against each other. But we're stronger than it is. We're united. She began to speak in what I recognized as the Crow language, but somehow, everyone seemed to understand her words. As she spoke, the shadow above us began to writhe and twist, as if it was in pain. Other people began to join in, speaking in their own languages, English, Spanish, various Native American tongues, but all saying the same thing, words of unity, love, and protection. The shadow fought back, sending waves of hatred and fear through the crowd. But each time it attacked, the people responded with stronger declarations of unity and love. Finally, with a sound like thunder, the shadow broke apart and dissipated. The sky cleared, the temperature returned to normal, and the malevolent wind died away. In the silence that followed, River turned to address the crowd one final time. What we just experienced, she said, was real. There are forces in this world that feed on division and hatred, but we've proven tonight that when we stand together, when we choose love over fear and unity over division, we are stronger than any darkness. The circle of protection that was formed that day became a model for other communities across the country. The story of what happened on our ranch spread, inspiring similar gatherings and coalitions in other regions. River continued to serve as a leader and mediator, helping to resolve conflicts and bring people together. She never claimed to be anything more than a rancher's daughter who had learned some valuable lessons. But I knew better. I knew that the baby I had pulled from the Yellowstone River 28 years earlier had grown up to become exactly what the prophecy had foretold, a warrior who could bridge two worlds and protect both peoples from the darkness that threatened to divide them. Today, as I watch my granddaughter Dawn playing in the same fields where I found River all those years ago, I'm reminded that some stories don't have endings. They just continue, passing from one generation to the next. River saved me from corporate thugs, but more importantly, she saved our entire community from something far more dangerous, the darkness of division and hatred that threatens to tear our country apart. The river brought her to me as a gift, and she became a gift to everyone whose life she touched. That's the real miracle of our story, not that a baby survived being abandoned in a river, but that she grew up to become a force for unity and healing in a world that desperately needs both. And every time I see her working with the circle of protection, bringing together people who once saw each other as enemies. I'm reminded that sometimes the most powerful warriors are those who fight not with weapons, but with love. The end.